you guys good?
Yep, yeah.
Are you all good? Contention 1 is the NRC to determine protection standard used for radiation contact as well as other harmful emissions that are products of producing nuclear energy. The National Regulatory Commission, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the U.S. Department of Energy base all of their calculations on what is known as the reference or standard man. This character is a 20 to 30-year-old Caucasian male of average stature from Western European or North American culture. The use of reference man as the sole standard for regulations requires populations that do not fit the qualities are excluded from protection. Machiani 08. Reference man was an attempt to provide a standard set of biological characteristics that be used to systematize the calculation of radiation protection. Reference man is defined as being between 20 and 30 years of age, weighing 150 pounds, is 5 feet 7 inches in height, lives in climate with an average temperature of 10 to 20 degrees Celsius. A Caucasian, Western European, or North American habitat and custom. This definition leaves out a vast majority of people, including substantial numbers of workers, from explicit consideration of radiation protection. The continued use of reference man is war practice because it does not take into account the greater radiation doses received in some parts of the population that result from the same environmental condition, the higher cancer risk per unit of dose they face, especially applies to women and children. Even though reference man is taken meaning only around 20, this definition makes no mention of the possibility of men may become involved in what that might mean in terms of the impacts on the framework of radiation protection regulations. While radiation, the dose of the gonads calculated reference man framework to taking out possible hereditary effects, non-cancer reproductive effects, are not part of the U.S. regulatory framework for radiation protection. Reference man is currently the basis of many federal regulations and compliance guidelines, including workplace radiation exposure, claim of radioactively contaminated sites, some radionuclides, and drinking water, notably alpha radiation emitting transuranic radionuclides. Reference man used in three federal agencies: the Environmental Protection Agency, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the Department of Energy. And even though the statistical representation for the effects of women and children, the use of reference man is pervasive in many different energy industries. Machiani 08. External dose calculated for parameters related to adult NRC radiation protection regulations use reference to minor and unsatisfactory adjusted for age in case of some external exposure calculation. The EPA Federal Guidance Report 13 contains dose conversion factors for children. In the case of Clean Air Compliance Model, children were specifically considered for compliance calculation, maintain consistency with earlier compliance. Special permission needed to deviate from the approved compliance estimation methods. The use of reference band is pervasive in radiation protection guidance compliance not uniformly so. Children often ignored even though science to determine whether or not being higher dose has long been available. Women are either partially included or not included at all. And creating a gender-neutral ideal such as the standard man allows for men what is deemed masculine to be privileged over everything that is feminine considered feminine. Cotter 08. They take the actual status of one sex and status quo as desirable universe when one sex is actually what both sexes should have. This manifest sociological thing, the idea that the universe we should aim for is something that we can find actualized in the world in which we already live. The idea that both sexes have what one sex has in status quo makes equality claims susceptible to employing facile analogies between the experiences of women and men. Positing a gender-neutral universe is likely an impossible project because women and men should be allowed to become irreducibly different from one another. There's a difference between those deep, a difference between kinds of social statuses, the difference between social statuses or preferences. It is unlikely a single abstract model of moral and political life can represent them both. Positing a single universal that encompasses both of them is likely to privilege one of them. If this time continue to look for gender-neutral universe, we rather draw on a particular repertoire of existing symbols to articulate. Thus, our legal configurations already privileged by this so-called gender-neutral universe is likely to privilege masculine. And we call for recognition of naturalized discrimination. The use of reference man allows for gender discrimination inherent in the language society uses to overcome these problems. People must understand sexism and prejudices and subtlety. Otherwise, the power of discrimination, self-regulating, accepted because of its indiscernibility. Lazar 7. Two important insights for feminist ideas and recognition of the difference in diversity among women and men is called for undertaking historic and cultural contingent analysis, gender sexism, and the pervasiveness of discursive worth in modern power in many society. Feminist ideas undertake contingent analysis of oppression of women and sobriety and monotonous or similar critical discourse analytic perspectives useful to complement the concept of modern power with the view of modern power relations. The dominance modern power is effective because mostly cognitive based on internalization, gender norms, act out, routinely attacks and talk of everyday life. Relations of power and dominance can be discursively resistant, counter-resistant, dynamic struggle over securing and challenging the interests of state. Objections by feminist critics to sexist representation of the media have sometimes led to recycling of these same images dressed in seemingly inoffensive, poetic ways. And a feminist critical discourse analysis is key to redefine gendered rhetorical structures. Such practice enables people to see the relationship between social structures and discursive practices. When one is able to understand the influence the language has on social thinking, they are better able to understand how to destruct oppressive and dominant systems from their social based on Lazaro 7. In terms of feminists and CDA in particular, however, there's much overlap in terms of social emancipatory goals. Feminist CDAs have advantage to operate the aspect within politically and best explanatory practical discourse analysis. Feminists also learn much about the interconnection between particularities and discursive situations, strategies, employing various forms of social inequality and personal feedback and critical feminist analysis and strategies for social change. CDA's political perspective on gender concerned with demystifying the interrelation of gender, power, and ideology and discourses of applicable to text and talk equally offers a corrective approach the favorite one linguistic mode over another. And included in a feminist discourse, the analysis must be critical self-reflexivity. Reflexivity is key to any sort of feminist agenda. This realization is a crucial first step in undermining the institution that perpetuates such practices. Lazaro 7. A critical focus on reflexivity must be an important facet of the practice of feminist idea. Reflexivity is manifest in the institutional practice where the implications of possibilities of changes, social personal attitudes in the practice of an individual that need to be ongoing. Critical self-reflexivity among feminists, they feed on achieving radical transformation of gender social structures. The problem not so much gets to appropriating feminism merely for commercial gain, but that such appropriate entails a subversion of feminism's political force, rendering it only assigned value. Recuperative reflexivity, however, not limited to consumers, also used for persuasive effect by governments and other institutions, or may be applied to the existence of progressive discourses for pragmatic reasons, from desire to project an enlightenment self and only superficially attend to them. And discursive representations matter. When people are able to define the world that their words not only shape them, but the social institutions and interactions they live within. Discourse effectively controls and limits what can be discussed in policy making, enables so too. Discourse limits being discussed are heard in political context, not necessarily tied to particular organization dynamics, to generate class and reason among other structures of inequality, shape whose voice are heard and represented in policy makes also social movement context. The first political constituency who use community control to contradictory purposes illustrate how the movement acts, lose control of movement frame over time. And working through established institutions inevitably co-opting feminist movement ways for feminist idea, which would attempt to change the way language functions. The ultimate goal of radical social transformation is discursive critique of the prevailing restrictive structures, stepping in that direction. Liberal reforms position their inadequate equality by dominant structures of equality, just respecting applies same men with the arts always set by men. Instead of rattleship, women are required to fail the prevailing androcentric structures. The dominant liberal ideology assumes the same as small women. It is allowed middle-class, heterosexual, Western, white women to represent their expartial experiences universally shared by all women, thereby ignoring the material conditions and needs of non-Western, non-white, lesbian, disabled, and poor women around the globe. And contention 2, why debate? Much like the NRC, our debate idolized a standard man. Our community holds commenters up to a standard that determines how speaker points are allocated, who wins and who loses, and what a good debater acts like and looks like. The reference point we use is based on masculine traits such as dominating cross-sex, speaking loudly, quickly, and with authority, and prioritizing facts and objective knowledge over personal experience. I'm Eisenberg, no date. Performing these characteristics is a necessity to win debates. Less aggressive or assertive debaters receive lower speaker points, too passive, too quiet, too soft, not ready for the battle. You lose, kid is really about being able to participate in very, very culturally masculine space. The culture of competition is tied to expected tactical skills in debate, being able to speak fast, talk loud, and other performances associated with masculinity, and establishes expectations for how people should be performing. While her goals become more assertive, it feels like she must change a large part of her identity in exchange for competitive success. This unspoken cultural aspect of competition is so invisible, internalized, normalized. Debaters yet see how these notions of masculinity actually manifest themselves less here in the back of the room, performing aspects of masculinity in a bad way. She able to manage some of these barriers just to push more to be accepted as more attention to social proof and performing masculinity. And we must focus how our language shapes our perceptions. Debaters, people, and political subjects may be able to change the real world. We can change our community. Arc 93. Language is not merely some transparent tool used to transmit information, rather an incredibly powerful medium, the use of which inevitably has real political and material consequences. It's important for us to examine the discourse of debate practices, language, discourse, and meanings that we as a community debaters and coaches are thinking and applying academic debates. Not acceptable anymore for us to go along as we always have, assuming that things will straighten themselves out. Complacency breeds resentment and frustration. We may rather be able to change the world. We can change our own community and fail to do so. We give up the only real power we have. And feminist and academic communities such as debate must work in multiple ways to gain greater acceptance, specifically the promotion of research practices like the 1AC, set conflict and no date. Women and men must continue work towards greater acceptance of feminist research and approach to the style of presentation. Their argument breaks with traditional norms, macros empowerment, not for women, but for humans, includes the development of habits of academic discourse, the housing of alternative rhetorical strategies, and traditional publication acceptance of non-traditional and qualitative research. And the world is nothing more than descriptions of it. There's no truth or falsity in the world, so what people say is true, and this changes with the changing times, because language is not subject to change rules, vocabulary, change, create personal and social change. Otherwise, we won't be left with patriarchal nationalized language. And finally, Renninger and Sowers 03. Humans create truth and language and functions, the mechanisms they use to explore and understand themselves, the world around them. Truth therefore continues its capacity to change, and humans, their description of the words they use change over time to better suit their needs. People create what Roeder calls final vocabulary, is the set of words and sentences that we can use to justify actions and beliefs. We use vocabulary to share meaning about how we think about the world around us, but due to limitations of language, never actually generate a description of what that fully represents reality. Use of patriarchal language erodes women's sense of themselves, Daly explains. We need only think of words such as feminine, unfeminine, womanly, and unwomanly to recognize how certain words, particularly those that are supposed to name us, not only fail to express who we are, but also destroy our identity. Using entrenched language and traditional rhetorical methods and ideas ensure the continuation of the existing social order. Cross-sex.
I didn't even think I got your name before the round. What's your name?
Andrew.
Andrew, it's nice to meet you, Andrew.
What was your name?
My name's Sarah Bass.
Sarah, okay.
Okay, so let's talk about what is feminism?
What is feminism?
What is feminism?
In terms of the 1AC, like we have endorsed a feminist critical discourse, which analyzes the way language functions in terms of like academic discourse.
Sure, but what is feminism?
What is like
the feminism of the 1AC? Show your critique of language, but I'm trying to get at what feminism is.
Like trying to give our feminism a title?
No, Sarah, I'm not trying to get it a title. I'm trying to understand so that I can debate.
There are different kinds of feminism. The feminism that we endorse is a specific discourse analysis.
Okay.
The Lazar evidence is really specific to our kind of feminism being very reflexive, very open to different kinds of social locations.
Sure.
And
what's a social location?
A social location? The way or the position that people are in, that they find themselves in. Like, I am a debater at Idaho State. I'm a big sister.
Sure.
Yeah. On your Lazaro side, I mean, you have multiple, but this is the crucial first step towards oppression. So you're the first starting point, right? Prior to, I mean, before we can talk about energy policy, we must
We
address
believe
how
we're a
debate
policy
versus
prerequisite.
Yeah, your prerequisite to policy.
But
Okay.
here's the best way to approach debate, correct?
We don't claim that. We claim that we are a crucial strategy.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So talk to me a little bit about the impact. What is the impact of the app?
In the first or second contention.
I'm just looking for what does the app solve for?
In the first contention, it's really just a criticism of the standard man as it's
Sure, I
used
get
for
what the
power.
K is. I'm just looking for the impact so I can understand them.
The impact in the first contention is
There are a
marginalization
couple.
of
Okay.
There's the Naples and Lazaro evidence talk about how discourse pre-organizes who is heard and what is talked about.
Okay, so it's
in
like
the
silencing of
political realm.
others.
Well, kind of. It's just like what
I
is
just want to
discussed.
understand.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah. Like the Naples evidence is specific to who is heard and what is discussed. The Lazaro evidence says pretty much the same thing, with only a certain category of feminist being able to get their political.
sure.
Uh,
So the debate
on.
standard man, I actually really think this is very interesting analysis. This debate standard man, is it a critique of the way that we engage in debate? Like, is it going to turn into a critique of the way the negative engages in debate?
No. It's a critique of the forcing of certain individuals to adopt certain standards of what a good or ideal debater looks like
Sure.
or acts like.
Sure.
Who said that loud and fast is masculine? I mean, is there like a specific author, or was it?
The Eisenberg evidence is specific to those traits being generally masculine,
Okay.
like historically.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
We're gonna make politics this sad. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, I think you're totally sapping all of Obama's political capital right now.
dude. Feminism is like the anti-politic. Don't hold me to that. It's not actually a thing.
I'm recording that.
You're not recording. He is.
He's recording.
Little do you know.
Little do my phone's in my purse.
What was your name?
Kendra.
Kendra, here you go, Kendra.
Thank you.
We know all ready?
You said it was 2 off?
Yeah. 2. Are you ready, Judge? You guys ready?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just making sure. All right.
Oh no,
You-
can I get the?
It's paper.
Oh,
It's 100%
I
paper.
apologize.
You can totally get the paper. Promise I'll give it to you.
Once you're done with it,
As soon
of
as
course.
you
I
get it.
apologize.
Absolutely.
Now we're good.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Hey, there is no such thing as nature. The ecocentrism operates on a backdrop that thinks the environment is separate from humanity. The result is fundamentally violent ideology, more than intent. Ecocentrism provides toxic environment. Much American ecocentrism is a vector for various masculinity themes. Judah Butler shows that heterosexual form produces a metaphysical manifold that separates the inside from the outside. The inside from the outside manifold is fundamental for thinking environmentalist metaphysical causes of nature is impossible to construct without violence. The inside-outside manifold gender identification never be totally successful in the body isn't just an impermeable closed form. Ideologies of nature are found in the inside-outside all. We should achieve radical ecology of politics by facing the difficulties of strange change. We have others rather than others literally have us under our sins. Intimacy does not fit in a straight box. It's life, but not as we know it. And next, the environmental app is Aladdin with eugenics. The K is an urgent intervention, a problematic assumption of the app Hogan intent. In terms of murders and queer interventions in nature ecocentrism relevant to the urban American environmentalists had long relationships with the eugenic and the early conservatives were eugenics who believed that maintaining the purity of both nature and the gene pool assumptions and the languages and images in the American environmental particularly susceptible to eugenic influences ought to be the focus of contemporary progress, critical inquiry, and the fear enormously and critical project. And next, the alternative, reject compulsory nature, queer ecology undermines the world, Norton 10. Against compulsory nature, we should work with intimacy. The implicit of the Chinos is hostile to the implicable difference, and the interdependence implies differences cannot be totalized. The world have horizons, and there's the outside. The queer ecology would undermine the world. And next, their insistence on sex gender hierarchies as the starting point references Coloniality, Lewis, and 07. Understanding the place of gender in pre-colonial societies is also essential to understanding the extent of the importance of gender system, discriminating communal relations, egalitarian relations, and ritual thinking, the decision-making, the authority, and the economies, the imposition of gender system is constitutive to the colonial powers. The colonial powers constitutive to the colonial modern gender system could not exist without the coloniality of power, since the classification of population in terms of race is necessary condition to its possibility. And I'm sorry, that was the second off, and that was decoloniality. And then next, privileging feminist epistemology recreates the harms of coloniality, Gross Vegan 11. Globalization studies of political economy paradigms in the world system analysis of not the epistemological expressions in the academia, the ethnic studies, the woman studies that can still continue to produce knowledge from the Western man. Point zero got our point of view. From this point of view, the capitalist world system, primarily economic making profits, manifested system. And next, heterosexualism, patriarchy, and biological dysmorphism driven to the matrix of colonial, Lewis and 07. The global Eurocentric capitalist understanding of what gender is about to develop the ways which non-white colonized women have been subject to discriminated organization of gender and the modern colonial gender system, biological dimorphism, practical heterosexual organizations, crucial to the understanding of the difference of gender reference along the racial lines hegemonically. These are written large over the meaning of gender. And next, the colonial power lies with the genocide of the third gender, Lewis and 07. Lewis and 07. Sorry, the dark side of the gender system is the thoroughly violent. We have begun to see the deep reductions of nominees, of female nominees, the third gender, the people who are ambiguous, the participation in the rituals, thinking and making economics, the reduction in the anomaly and the forced sex of the white colonizers, such to deep labor exploitation. The people often died working. Quijano tells us that the vast Indian genocide in the first decades of colonization was not caused in the main by the violence and the conquest, but the disease and the conquest they carried. Rather, it was due to the fact that the Indians were used to throw away labor force to work till death. And next, the colonial matrix of power allows hierarchical thought and domination. Stats in 08. Coloniality permitted the genocidal acts against the indigenous people and the Africans and the marginalization of knowledge and religion and non-modern cultures. This logic has been unlocked since the 16th century. The Spanish crown appropriated massive accounts of the land and brutally exploited indigenous people, enslaved and justified in the name of logic of salvation and progress. And next, coloniality is the start of modern sexual gender hierarchies. Lewis and 07. Understanding the place of gender in pre-colonial societies is essential to understanding the extent of importance in gender system and discerning communal relations, egalitarian relations, ritual thinking, collective decision-making, authority, and economies. Imperative to understanding the extent of the imposition in the gender system. Colonial power constituted, but we should know by now the colonial nature gender system can coexist without the colonial, since the classification of the population of other types of races necessary conditions possibility. Where's my alt?
Your alt's in there.
It's in there. Thus Sarah Beth and I affirm the following. Thus Sarah Beth and I offer the following affirmative. We must embrace the mentality of border thinking. Border thinking allows us to complete protection of modernity, but instead of retreating to absolution, and border thinking produces a redefinition of coloniality and power and lets us move beyond the narrow definitions imposed by European modernity. And next, critical border thinking provides a method to enact colonial shifts and connects colonial histories which are entangled with modernity into the project to link from modernity and involves the imperial and colonial differences. Mignolo 108. Critical border thinking provides a method to enact the colonial shifts and acts as a connector between the different experiences of exploitation that would be thought and exploited in the spirit of colonial difference. Thus, critical border thinking is a method that connects for versatility into use gossip equal 09. A peripheral nation state may experience the transforms of its form of incorporation in the capitalist world economy to break within the transform of the whole system within the nation state is completely beyond the range of possibilities. A global problem cannot have a national solution. The point here is to reify the nation state and understand the limits of political interventions at this level for the long transition of a system that operates within a world scale. The nation state is limited space for the radical political social transformation. Agencies the periphery need a global scope in order to make an effective political intervention. Coloniality is the power, a concept that attempts to integrate as part of the heterogeneous structure process the multiple relations to which cultural, political, and economic processes are entangled in capitalism. Coloniality conceptualizes the process of colonization of the Americans and the constituted capitalist world economy is part of the same entangled process. Structural heterogeneity implies the constitution of global racial hierarchy that was simultaneously in time and space constitution or internal division of labor. I'll be open to that.
Okay. Status of the alts. Status of the alts.
Conditional.
Okay. First
I
off.
have a question. So you say that privileging gender and sex-based hierarchies is inherently colonialist, correct?
Absolutely, because they created these hierarchies to begin with.
Okay, so what's the foundation of your queer ecology argument?
I'm sorry?
The queer ecology argument is not talking about a hierarchical structure.
Okay.
What Thomas Morton specifically critiques is the creation of an inside-outside binary.
Which you create by using male, female, masculine, feminine. You're creating that we're all different, that there's some type of separation between us.
That there's some type of separation.
Absolutely, and the
And
hierarchy.
that's a hierarchy that your evidence is talking about?
That's decoloniality. That's creating to the gender, racial, epistemic hierarchies they're created because of this colonialist mindset, which you are thus utilizing by naming women as women. You are using the name that they gave to us to make us another.
Okay.
Mhm.
I had
The
another
concept of
question, but I
gender.
can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
So go
Okay.
ahead.
Gender's constructed in our society. That's what we mean with.
Where do we say that, like, gender is not?
You construct it.
You're talking
Okay.
about doing a feminine discourse.
Okay.
Therefore, there is a feminine and a masculine to begin with.
Okay.
What's the link on the queer ecology?
Absolutely. So the link on the queer ecology is the inside-outside binary that you're creating, masculine and feminine. There is another. We're not the same.
It seems like all of your queer ecology cards are specific to there being a natural world, and the environmentalism
Sure,
of the
so
app that doesn't
feminism-
seem to be a part of the app.
Okay, if feminism is better than masculinity, then obviously masculinity is unnatural, and that's the more natural way, and that's where we should go. And that's a binary that you're creating as well. In addition to the fact that you're calling it feminism to begin with.
Okay.
We're all
So
this.
by naming it feminism, like, we're reinforcing these queer, like, the link on your queer ecology.
The link on the queer ecology is the inside-outside binary created by the affirmative. The affirmative creates this by endorsing feminism as the starting point.
So feminism as a starting point. Okay.
It's better than something, right? It's better than masculinity.
Well,
Well, a lot of your evidence specifically talks about the way in which we have to change this policy in order to escape the reference ban portions, to escape this this idea that we will be polluted if we continue to keep this policy. It's going to be an additional link in the book.
we're getting polluted.
That's what your evidence talks about. Your evidence talks
The
about
man is toxic.
using the
man.
reference man keeps us from being able to catalog toxicity.
And what is
against women.
toxic? That's another binary you're creating. What is toxic and what is not toxic? How do we know that's toxic? And why is man toxic?
Don't know where we use the word toxic in our 1AC, but I digress.
So your Makajani card specifically talks about radiation and about how doses of that radiation affect people and things like that, and talks
Yes,
about how
we
they affect women specifically.
We're
That's
gonna
what
take
you-
prep.
one of the ways.
Is very specific to recognition of the gendered language that we use is critical to being able to overcome and demystify the oppression and the discrimination that is going on toward the feminine subject. The Lazar specifically says that a feminist critical discourse analysis is key, and that being self-reflexive about the terms that we use is able to solve back for the problems that occur. The Naples and the last piece of Lazar evidence are very specific to political institutions failing right now and leading to failed policymaking. And to be able to overcome that, we have to have this kind of recognition that the 1AC calls for onto the debate page. It's probably problematic that they didn't even address this page. The Eisenberg evidence is very specific to the feminine in the debate community being excluded from being themselves. She specifically talks about how women have to adopt certain standards to be able to be competitive in the activity. In debate, women participants are expected to adopt masculine styles of communication in terms of their argument style, and evidence is Eisenberg in 12. There are deeply ingrained expectations in the policy debate community about successful performances, most of which are tied inherently to inherently masculine styles of persuasion and rhetoric. Policy debate emphasizes rationality over emotional appeal, the rate of delivery over stylistic presentation, and claims backed with objective or evidentiary support as opposed to embodied or experiential knowledge. These styles and expectations are neutralized through the rewards in the form of competitive successes, battle counts, and overall social acceptance within the community, fueling the performative double back. Many women in debate find themselves locked in the process of regulation and normalization are an integral feature of education. Female students have been able to deploy their knowledge of masculinity to support strategies of masculine regulation. A central feature of a young woman's education experience involves developing tactics to deal with institutional powerlessness, knowing that women are already at an inherent disadvantage coming into these sites, leading with stylistic expectations, performance tactics, and everyday resistance become an ideal way to challenge these norms at the micro level. And the alternative, neither of the alternatives do anything to overcome or be able to help the feminine in the debate community to be able to participate on their own terms. The Bjork evidence is going to be very critical here. It specifically says that when we have the ability to change the community that we participate in, we need to do so. Otherwise, we forfeit the only power that we have, because generally speaking, we can't actually embrace the alternative and expect things to change, like decoloniality and queer ecology. We are just debaters in a room. The only thing that we can do is change the way that our community functions. On to queer ecology. Okay. One principle: we can adopt the alternative and reject the feminine, the binary that the 1AC criticizes. Reflexivity is open to the queer as well, and capable of affirming it, and we are prerequisite feminist discourse assumes norms about people, i.e. calling a man a fucking pussy is intended to demasculinize him is intended to demasculinize them when a man may rather be feminine. There is a way that queerness works in a static manner. The alternative is going to foreclose this opportunity. For example, lesbians identify as women who have sex with women. The permutation is a way of understanding how identity and sexuality can be both fluid, as the alternative calls for, and static, as some people prefer. And we break down the masculine and feminine in a normalized language structure that they can't access. We solve the impact, but they can't solve the app without this kind of analysis because of the language that is used in the debate community and the political realm. And gender neutrality decide we must address the structures of patriarchy of hope to be out of such an oppressive system. The alternative ignores the ways in which masculine dominance is perpetuated and will inevitably reproduce the impacts of the 1AC. This is rigorous. In 85, the analysis of the various systems of question is necessary. A woman or phallic with other father's husband's precarious woman does not write anything but the locus of more or less competitive exchange between two men, including the competition for the possession of Mother Earth, for a woman to undertake tactical strikes to force themselves to social status, to compulse recognition, earn their living in order to escape from the condition of prostitute. These are certainly indispensable stages in the escape from the proletarialization on the exchange market. But if there were to simply reverse the order of things, history would repeat itself in the long run, would revert to sameness, to phallocratism, and FCD is comparative and understands the difference between different forms of oppression. That's the Liz arguments from the 1AC. The alternative is not going to be able to resolve that, which is talked about above. And the permutation solves the anthropocentrism is inevitable. Only the permutive provides the method by which we can be ideologically self-reflexive. This Lee in 6. Self-critical anthropocentrism has at its impetus in the recognition that one human-centeredness does not necessarily mean self-centeredness, and two, all points of view are relative in the sense that they are tethered to the particularities of a species-dependent perceptual and cognitive apparatus. Our points of view are human-centered because we are human beings, so we remain situated animals with cognitive, somatic, and perpetual abilities are fixed by our evolutionary history and informed by our system, our epistemic, geographic, and cultural conditions. Anthropocentrism is potentially a source of self-reflection and accountability, which can ground a theory of value consistent with feminist emancipatory goals. They say their link doesn't quite make sense because all of their evidence is specific to
the environmentalism of the affirmative and nature being a point of contention in the affirmative. But this is not what our app is. They say that the inside-outside binary that we create by using feminism as a starting point is what this link is. But none of their evidence is specific to feminism as a starting point, being this inside-outside binary. Their evidence is specific to the natural and the unnatural. This is something that the 1IC is able to criticize because these ideas that things can be natural and unnatural is precisely the metaphors that we are criticizing because they are inherently gendered, and the natural is always associated with the feminine. So we are going to be able to solve this criticism best onto decoloniality. The impacts of case outweigh the impact of decay. We have an in-round impact based on the feminization of the NRC regulations. Debate is a communicative activity that teaches its members how to create positive relationships to policymaking. This impact is going to come first because the negative impact is not going to be solved for by voting for the negative team. And firm to both individual politics is just as important as radical politics. Self-transformation is key to the movement. This Darcy and not changing society is better, but changing oneself in the course of such self-activity. Exploiting depressed people not only going to change the world, but also begin to change themselves. And they begin to contemplate more far-reaching social transformation as they gain deeper insight into the systemic roots of the social problems in order to realize radical agenda activists have to rely on the emergence of a movement for self-emancipation, in which an exploited and or oppressed group transforms itself into a collective agent of its own liberation, and thereby becomes a force for radical social change. Radicals cannot liberate others, but can only foster the emergence and strengthening a movement in which exploited and oppressed people to work toward liberating themselves. And from to both, we already embrace the alternatives notion of re-examining our basis of knowledge of subcomic and method evidence from the 1AC criticizes dominant Western norms of knowledge production, and our starting point is the best one. Self-reflexivity allows people to understand how they fit into FCDA from their economic, cultural, and any other positions they identify with. This key to solve the criticisms. This is Schneider in 12. Winnemucca creates a reciprocal relationship with those European Americans engaged in such a discourse by adding and asserting a tribally informed perspective and knowledge, and thus maintaining sovereignty. The revision of conventional history by colonized peoples is necessary in order to resuscitate their own hidden histories. This is the moment of decolonization, when it becomes not only to include accounts of marginalized people, but to be produced by them in various forms of self-representation. Winnemecca's tribology opens up interpretations of history by providing an alternative perspective, keeping history alive, even with its embedded ambiguities and conflict. Maintains a reciprocal relationship with European American histories and representations, and therefore enacts indigenous feminism. And the permutation is going to be able to solve best because it takes into account the language that the debate community and policymakers use surrounding energy policies without a focus. Patriarchy takes over. That's the rigor evidence from the previous flow. And we must address Western notions of masculinity, otherwise dominance will continue. This Schneider in 12. She consistently meditates and translates cultural understanding and representations of masculinity and the discourse of morality upon which both Native and European American masculinities rely. Meditation or mediation often reproduces rather than reduces conflict. She indirectly identifies the fundamental paradigm or ideology that informs gender and race as a hierarchy of dominance in Western cultures opposed to inclusivity, complementarity, and reciprocity in Pew culture. How European American masculinity indicates negatively affects Pew women and conceptions of masculinity first upon contact to market there. And the two positions seem to be very contradictory.
I have a couple of questions real fast, and then Shay's going to take over. So, talk to me about how feminist discourse. Sorry. My question was different. Where is my question?
So how do you already embrace the? Sorry, hold on. So you believe that your app will solve for the problems in debate because you said that decoloniality won't. So why is it that yours can solve and ours can't?
Well, we have the Lazar evidence is very specific to self-reflexivity about the terms of what?
What is self-reflexivity?
Understanding how we each use certain terms and how we each are implicated.
Okay. So yours is better because it helps us understand that? I'm just trying to understand
better than what?
Better
than ours. You said that yours solves and ours doesn't.
Both of the alternatives, or?
Yes. Why?
Yeah.
Why is
Okay. So the way that we claim to solve for debate is in debate when we point out certain terms that are gendered. People change their mind, especially when the ballot is taken into account, because when people are at risk of losing a debate round for saying a certain word, they will change the way that they use those terms.
Okay, absolutely.
That's not necessarily the case for the alternatives.
Moving on to the next one. No, that's not that.
Okay, so when you say that the feminine subject. You talk about the Lazar
Yeah.
evidence at the top of the NRC. This is the top of your speech.
Yeah.
What do you mean by the feminine subject?
The subject which is feminized.
Okay. And
Not
how is-
not necessarily like a woman
Sure.
biologically, or someone who identifies as a woman.
So how do you access, or how do you already embrace the bias of knowledge better than we do?
The subconvic and Mafano evidence is very specific to adopting alternative styles of research practices and methodologies.
I'm talking about you guys, because you're saying you single-handedly by running this change debate. So how do you access it better? Not your authors. Interpreting your authors.
I'm getting there.
Okay, go
The
ahead.
subconvic and Mafano evidence is specific to adopting and utilizing different kinds of research strategies. We claim that we are that kind of research strategy because FCDA is very different than the scientific discourses
Sure.
that are
Okay,
prevalent in
that's
both
great.
debate and the political realm.
Okay.
How long has Ceda been around?
Oh, they said it yesterday. I can't remember. 80s?
It's like the early 70s, yeah.
Yeah.
How long has the NDT been around?
I have no idea.
Okay.
So
it's been
you
like the
said
early
women are
20s.
disadvantaged right now in this while we're in debate, correct?
In the debate community,
Okay,
yes.
so if women are no longer women, then are they disadvantaged?
I think that's problematic to think that women can no longer be women. Forcing people to give up their subjectivity is probably bad.
Forcing people to no longer approach themselves.
Well, that's what I talk about on the
Purely by
pure
gender
ecology,
respect.
Kay.
Okay.
There are static interpretations of identity and there are fluid
right,
interpretations of
that's
identity.
fine.
We should
One
embrace
more
them.
more question. You only solve in the room, right?
Both. That's the point of the two different conventions.
So
The political and just this room
got it.
for the debate convention.
Starting crowd. I will. I'll do it. Don't worry. Hey, can we get the decoloniality and queer eco cards back from you?
The stacks of paper.
Yes, yeah. All the trees.
It's not necessarily in order.
Alright, is everyone ready? Connie? Good to go? When we asked them in cross-text, they said that Ceda had been around since like the 70s or whatever. We sort of clarified that in cross-text. They made a piece of Lazar evidence that talks about how established institutions are always going to be co-opting these things. And so when they read this from an established institution and try and do it within the debate space, they're actually always going to fail because they are using an established institution to try to change an established institution, which means the debate community is just going to co-opt them. It's just going to try and pardon their stuff, just going to try to take away their stuff. And this ultimately means that their project is going to fail. This means that all of their offense on how they're going to be solving in this round is completely gone because they are using their own card against them because their discourse in this round, let's cross-apply their Naples evidence, actually matters, and their discourse in this round has said that established institutions actually co-opt. Now, we'll agree that the debate has all of these expectations and hierarchies that it places on us, and that's actually the purpose of the critique, the decoloniality critique and the queer eco critique. The purposes of these critiques is to critique these hierarchies and to say that these hierarchies are actually bad, and defining these hierarchies in the way that we define them is problematic. And so they talk about the feminine in the debate community, and in cross-text she said these are people who are assigned femininity, but they don't talk about people who aren't assigned femininity or masculinity. There are people who are assigned neither, and when we don't talk about those people, then we're failing to address our entire community. There are people in this community who identify as transgender who may not be perceived as feminine but are feminine, who may not be perceived, there are people who identify as transgender who may not be perceived as masculine but are masculine or want to be identifying that way. And so when we talk about the debate community and the ways in which we change the community, we want to make sure that we're talking about it in a way that's holistic and inclusive of the entire community, and the affirmative doesn't do that. Let's go to queer eco. The criticisms are going to outweigh and turn the case. We have multiple different links to the affirmative. The first link, I had this. Thank you. So we talked about this a little bit in cross-text. They read these a couple of cards about how the reference man structure actually recreates a binary of systemic crimes against feminine people because that it doesn't actually include them at all. In these cards, what they talk about is about how we have to make sure we change this in order to stop the rates of cancer. We have to make sure we change this in order to purge feminine bodies of this unnatural thing that we can't be purged of right now. This is the inside-outside binary, one of the inside-outside binary links. In addition to that, the creation of feminine, masculine, in and of itself is an inside-outside binary link because when we create a feminine, feminine, then we create a masculine. When we affirm a feminine, then we affirm a masculine. That's how the inside-outside binary works. And so the way that the affirmative does that is problematic. And the Morton evidence, while it talks about environmentalism as well, also specifically, the two pieces of Morton evidence at the top, specifically talk about how when we create hierarchical structures, that becomes problematic. And that's why we have to let the 1AC die in order for everyone to be able to live, because we have to embrace the strangeness that exists between us. We have to embrace the space that exists between me and the judge, between me and the videographer, between me and the other team, and between me and the outside world. And when we erase that strangeness, then we're in the world of the alternative, and we've rejected this compulsory idea of nature, and we've rejected this idea that we have to be somehow in creation of hierarchies in order to define and structure our lives. So the alternative is to queer ecology and to obliterate the current hierarchical organization of the square. They keep these hierarchies in place that can't exist in the world of the alternative, which is why they'll never be able to solve for the alternative. So they... All right. So let's talk a little bit more about this. So we're going to do the K proper now. Sorry, that was a really long overview. I'm going to do the K proper now. Okay, so you can extend across our first piece of Morton evidence. This piece of Morton evidence talks about how we have an inside-outside binary linked to the affirmative case. Their compulsory nature, the only event that can result from the inside-outside thinking is a reification of the violent ideology of compulsory nature. That's where the nature part comes in. When they create a masculine and a feminine, they create a natural and an unnatural. They say that we should make something more natural, that the way that masculinity exists in the debate community right now is wrong. It's unnatural, and we should seek to make it more natural. That puts things on the outside. When we put things on the outside, then we create a binary that does harm, systemic harm, probably causes the harms of the affirmative. They make the assumptions that there's some normal to return to, but life is not natural or normal. Life is monstrous, chaotic, and unpredictable. Only the alternative of queering nature allows for the rejection of the inside-outside binary. These are just blocks. I'm just saying them there. Okay? And so when you extend across the second piece of Morton evidence, I covered this in the overview. You can cross-apply my analysis on strange stranger here, specifically about how we have to let the 1AC die so that everybody can have access to things on an equal level. When we have a masculine here and a feminine here, and then we switch it and we say, no, the feminine should be prioritized and the masculine should be deprioritized, then we've created a same hierarchy again. And what we need to do is actually equalize it, and that's what the alternative does. And there's going to be an additional ethics impact here. We'll talk about the eugenics impact in a second. Heteronormativity eradicates the subject for an impact turned to the 1AC. Just let the app die. It has no purpose and only reinforces infinite queer violence culminating in soul murder. Yep, Leviathan and Hela and 3. Internalized homophobia, the former self-hatred, self-destructive thoughts, and behavioral patterns become firmly implanted in the lives and psyches of individuals in heteronormative society. Heteronormativity is so powerful that its regulation and enforcement are carried out by the individuals themselves, so that through socially endorsed and culturally accepted forms of soul murder is a term I borrow from the child abuse and neglect literature. Child abuse and neglect literature to highlight the torment of heteronormativity. Soul murder is the apparent willful abuse and neglect of children by adults that are so sufficient of intensity and frequent to be traumatic, so that the children's subsequent emotional development has been profoundly and predominantly negatively affected. We're causing an ethical impact here of forcing people to hide their who they may identify as, because they create a binary where some people get to be privileged and others don't. And they cause a eugenics impact because the creation of notions of compulsory nature as well as the conceptualization of an inside-outside binary creates a world of eugenics. Eugenics is the purification of an entire population to remove an abject other, the violent extermination of entire populations. This is the same process that has been going on throughout history. The state has worked violently to exclude populations such as the Jews within Nazi Germany and the pogroms created by Russia. Even though the U.S. slave trade and the current treatment of immigrants without paper, eugenics doesn't just affect the lives that are lived now, but all potential lives in the future. Winning a risk of this impact is an additional link to any of our offense about heteronormativity. And so let's go down to the perm debate for the moment. The perm continues to construct nature. Nature does not exist. It's not real. That's our Morton evidence from the 1NC. The perm links back to the K because it forces the construction of nature. Compulsory nature requires constant reappropriation, anxiety, and otherization. By constructing nature, the app continues to constantly construct nature, or face the inevitable that nature does not exist, and that the binaries that they create do not actually exist. And the perm can't solve. Now is the time for dissonance in order to prove a new epistemic vision to dismantle the conceptualizations of oppression. Permutation is an act of congruence or coordination when the opposite is necessary. Lee and Dow and 1. Critiques are to undermine the metaphysical structure of logic. They remind us that its cultural and historical contingency. Dissonance created process to consider whether it might be possible to develop a different epistemic vision. Such a possibility is surely vital to our common liberation, dismantling oppressive conceptual systems which continue to paralyze collective political action. And
The poem is a parasite drawing sustenance off the alternative for women. Even one link to the planet proves that the poem is reinforcing the ontology of domination. The planet separates and divides using an inside-outside logic. The poem doesn't do both as a mutually beneficial relation of K and F. Rather, it concedes a link and tries to feed off the K in order to live on. The queer ecology, the querying of ecology alone corrects this dominating relationship to the alternative. The alternative is the key internal link to true relationality. Relationality is the key, and we can change that relationality here in this room. We change the relationship. Right now it's bad, it produces fear, anxiety, it otherwise it degrades, it attempts to clean the waste it attempts to clean things up. The app world has a telos world. We're not engaging in any telos. There is no world. We're all just mesh interconnectedness. Rejecting compulsory nature allows the queer body to be realized, ends the cleansing of unnatural queers from compulsory nature structure that insists that they are the other, different, not part of the norm. We're an impact turn to the ethical organization of the 1AC. We're also going to turn the case here. Queer ecology prevents the violence of all others by reframing the environment to prevent the destruction of the unfit other. This is Hogan intent. Queer critical intervention into such uses of nature and environment is both the dark purposes to which nature and environmentalism can be put, disrupting, challenging, undermining normative ideas of what counts as naturally and fit and unfit. Such critical work is important to humans in all nature as the work of identifying environmental racism. Typical instances of environmental degradation include the destruction of queer bodies, communities, and cultures through topical discourses of natural, unnatural, and unfit. I marked the card for you. And we're going to be turning patriarchy as well. Heteronormativity reveals itself through compulsory heterosexuality. Compulsory heterosexuality is patriarchal, subordinates, degrades, and oppresses women. This is yet in 8. Heteronormativity manifests itself through obligatory heterosexuality. Compulsory heterosexuality creates a condition which it never occurs to many women to be anything else but heterosexual. The channels these women into marriage, motherhood, and the service of men. Heterosexuality is the key side of male dominance and power. Heterosexuality, a patriarchal institution that subordinates, degrades, and oppresses women. There's that patriarchy card for you.
Thanks.
No problem. Let me set my timer.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So you say that we create the natural and the unnatural. Does this binary not exist in the status quo?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't?
No. Well, I mean, you created in this room, and since we're only talking
So when
about
the Eisenberg evidence is specific to the ideal debater being a masculine one, and that is deemed natural, and people who do not fit into that natural ideal debater are excluded, that seems to be indicating that that binary exists, at least in the debate space.
Is there a question?
And you're increasing
Is
the
that true?
binary by preferring women over men, by preferring
Right,
Like
I said in my
the
speech.
feminine over the masculine.
the feminine.
So I got it. So when I said in my speech that what you do is you say masculine is on top right now and feminine is on the bottom, and we should switch it. That's what your
Where
app
do we
says.
say that we should switch it?
Your app says that we should privilege the feminine over the masculine.
Where in the 1AC does it say that?
It all over the
Lazard
1AC.
It
The
seems to
Lazard evidence says it, and
The Lazar, so the 1AC says that the feminine should be prioritized over the masculine.
Feminine discourse, correct.
that feminine discourse should be prioritized.
So is it the method or the endpoint that you're criticizing?
The methodology is problematic.
The methodology of what?
The methodology of affirming
having
feminism.
a
Privileging
strategy?
feminism over masculinity. I mean,
Of
privileging anything
privileging
at all.
feminist ideologies over other ideologies, any other ideologies, creates a hierarchy. It creates a thing where feminism
It
and
seems
only
that
feminism is
the
at the top.
alternative does that as well.
Okay, the alternative doesn't do that. The alternative is a rejection of the affirmative.
Okay, well then it seems that the alternative on the other sheet links to this.
We
Because
allow
it
for
explicitly
multiple-
says that it is the best methodology.
Okay?
Because we allow for
Because
multiple
we're not
of
creating
those.
any hierarchies. The negative doesn't create hierarchies.
When you say
So
you
yes,
are the best methodology, how is that not a creation of a hierarchy that is different than the 1AC?
we are having a debate about competing methodologies. That's how we're engaging your debate.
It just
is
seems
through competing
it just seems to
methodologies.
me that either I'm not understanding the link on queer ecology or the criticisms link to one another.
The criticisms do not link to
All
one
of
another.
So then
it-
if
if
you
you-
put
so then
more
it
than
seems like
groceries
there is
down
no
in the
link
room,
to
they
the
Do you
would
want me
be
to
fun.
answer who's the best methodology?
No,
I have a
that's-
little friend- You're asking if we're asking that, if we're saying that we are the best methodology. And I'll
No,
answer
your
that.
evidence specifically says
We
we
have
are
a
the
point.
best
Yeah,
And I'm
methodology.
going to go ahead and defend that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just curious as to how that gets out of the link on the queer ecology K.
The queer ecology K constructs feminism. What we say is the colonial matrix of power, now we're talking about the decoloniality
yes.
K, is a system where we have to address all hierarchies simultaneously. You only address one, that's problematic.
All hierarchies simultaneously.
Yes. And you only address one, and that's problematic.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm good. Thank you.
Cool, no problem.
1 second.
You ready?
1 second.
We'll take a second, okay?
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm done prepping. Mind if I turn this?
Oh, no, I don't care. I'll get out of your way.
No, you're not. I just don't want to, I'll do you guys.
We have 5 minutes left.
Do you have demo?
Huh? They didn't have
No,
that.
okay.
You know what that means, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All are ready?
What's the order?
Yes.
The order is decall and case.
Decall in case?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a second. I need to enter this.
Which page on case?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Which page on case?
I'm going to be going all over case.
Okay.
Yeah, well, both contentions, I mean. Ready? Okay. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and say they completely dropped the role of the ballot. Whoever offers the best method of challenging the colonial power matrix and creating new form of knowledge production within the debate space. They're saying they're completely doing something to change debate and make debate better because they're getting rid of this masculine form and creating this new,
Feminist epistemology.
epistemology that's supposedly better. We're challenging all of this. We're saying neither nor is better, that we should have multiple views, multiple different subaltern types of views, points of views within debate. I think that we should destroy all hierarchies in debate. I think that we should come up here with different plans, be able to talk about different things, not just putting feminist hierarchies on top. So yes, I am affirming the fact that we are the best starting point because we allow access for the most amount of people in debate and the most different types of knowledges to be heard, not just feminist hierarchy structures of debate. All right, and that's our Gross-Fugel and 09 evidence and roll the ballot, and they have an answer to that. They completely dropped it. All right, and next on our legumes and 07 evidence, the colonial power allows for the genocide of the third gender. They completely dropped this evidence. There are people who don't actually comply with the gender. They don't want to have a gender. And so by them saying, well, I think it's kind of bad that you make people push their gender, I think people should have a gender. No, I don't think that you should make everybody have a gender. Everybody doesn't want to claim a gender. And there are some people in the trans community that are uncomfortable with claiming a gender because they don't want to relate to that. So I don't think that I should have to be pushed to be a girl. Or that I should have to claim feminine. So by pushing their Western epistemology that this feminist ideology is the best way to go, they're destroying the fact that there could be a third gender, and they're oppressing this voice.
It's both a link and an impact.
It's both a link and an impact. That's our Lewis and 07 evidence. And then this is a card. Alt solvency. Only on the epistemic breaking over helped to solve the hierarchy modes of domination. Gross-Fugel 11. The mythology of decolonization, the world of fierce continues between the colonial past and the current globalization hierarchies and continues the invisibility of coloniality today. The multi-heritage practice constitutes the global coloniality of the Euro-American people and the non-Euro-American people, global racial ethnic hierarchy, European, non-European, integral part of the development of the capitalist world system. We still have a colonial world. We need to break the narrow ways of thinking the colonial relations to accomplish the incomplete 20th century dream of decolonization, and that occurs in debate too, because we're trying to solve for debate right now. We need to think that there are other ways of thinking rather than just who's the best, who's the best. So whoever can incorporate the most modes of thinking, I think should win in this round, and we're not privileging gender hierarchical modes of thinking, which is why we should win. And besides, when they're advocating that their role is, or that changing the one thing in debate by changing this one relationship and changing it to the feminist theory is going to change everything, they're not taking into account the multiple hierarchical relationships that exist, that are entangled within each other. The notion of a single logic that runs the risk of reductionism, which is accepting this new thing, is completely contrary to the idea of complex systems and the other hierarchies that exist within those systems. All right, and next, one more card.
It reduces people down to gender.
And it reduces people down to gender, absolutely. Okay, one more card. The act perpetuates the colonial cycle of violence to the promises of modernity. Basically, their promises of modernity is that their way is going to solve, it's going to be better, and it's going to get rid of all these hierarchies in debate. Gross-Fugel 11. In order to convert the so-called savages and barbarians of the 16th century, followed by the civilizing mission of the 18th, 19th century, the imperial project of the 20th century, and the democracy and human rights in the 21st century have all been imposed by militarism, violence, and with the rhetoric of modernity and saving its own from its own barbarianism. In this case, it's saving us from masculinity. It reproduces an internal coloniality of power within the nation-state. Nationalists represented the global capitalism, reinforced the nation-state and the political institution in the form of modern colonial capitalist patriarchal world system. Not only are they utilizing the colonialist master language because they're claiming this gender and they're placing this hierarchy and they're pushing it upon people with their Western epistemology, even people who don't want to be claimed, they're on this democratizing of human rights, this 21st century mission to make everything right and everything the way they want it to be. And it's basically go with our plan or we're the best starting point or you're screwed. and it only allows for one form of knowledge, which is feminist epistemology. All right.
Extend the feminist epistemology.
Extend the feminist epistemology.
That's
All right.
the Lugan
All right.
sentence.
Next on our let's look on some of this. On our Gross-Fugel hierarchy is bad. Cross-apply the Lazarus evidence. This is Lazarus evidence. This is feminist. This is the crucial starting point. They're placing this starting point on everybody. They're putting this one-size-fits-all, this God-eye point of view that we all want to start from the starting point. How does this make men feel? What in this world, obviously in their cards, they say in their Lazarus 7 that, I think it's at Bufino, that men feel, women feel left out because of the patriarchal one. What if we adopt this feminist epistemology and only feminist epistemology? How are men going to feel in this system? Are they, and somehow is it going to switch around and they're going to feel like they're the ones being oppressed now, or they're the ones who are being followed by this feminist ideology pushed upon them? Next, go ahead and look at their Bjork 93 evidence that says we are the best critique of challenging perceptions in the debate. All they do is further the new gender hierarchy to view the world patriarchy, and basically on their perm, they can't perm because they're using the colonialist mindset. They cannot access our critique because they continue to use these hierarchies in which we are critiquing. They're continuing to use these oppressive hierarchies that the colonialist master put out there, so they cannot perm because they cannot continue to use this mindset. In order to access our mindset, you need an epistemic break. You need to allow the most knowledges. You cannot place a hierarchy. That is exactly what we're critiquing, and that is exactly what they're creating, is making debate. And then K turns case. Basically, we solve for all the harms that they claim that they solve for because we are the better starting point. We critique all hierarchies, and they create a hierarchy. Cross-apply their Hader and 08. Gross-Fugel is the only way to change this complete epistemic break. They say men are privileged overall. We say no one should be privileged overall, not even feminist epistemology. Go ahead into our their Naples 02 evidence that people define the world. People defining the world through men is bad, or people redefine the world, what is good and bad, through their own language. That's what they're doing. They're saying the world is better through their language. We're saying the world is better through most languages.
701 is what it was?
That's where we are.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what she got.
Okay. I don't know if you guys need these, but I read these.
Yeah, that was one. I got it. I have that. That's done. Will you do the case stuff? Can you do that? No. I have a couple of things. You can ask me about it. eugenics dissent to me?
Is eugenics impact on the, it's the impact to queer ego. What happens is that when you create an inside-outside binary, it forces some to be excluded.
Okay.
And when those are excluded, that creates eugenics. Yeah.
Order is going to be case.
Yeah.
I have my iPhone.
I have another timer in my backpack.
I have my iPhone.
Any, is it like similar contention 1, contention 2?
Yeah, contention 1, contention 2, and
And then queer ecology.
queer ecology and coloniality. And decoloniality. That's awesome. Is anyone not ready? Okay. So first in the standard line flow, they say that Ceda's an established institution for a long time. But first of all, like, our evidence specific to political institutions such as the United States federal government, which is why we don't endorse like federal government action. Ceda is not a political institution in the sense, which means they have neither a mechanism nor motivation to co-opt our feminist arguments, which means that this argument doesn't actually make sense. And then they say they're like discourse, like or enables like co-ops into hierarchies, but we don't organize anything into hierarchies. We allow for like a proliferation of identity within our 1AC. There is no reason why like we're not co-opting and then extend the Lazar evidence or like it's political institutions. If Bjork solves back to this, we change how debaters act. Like even what?
Sorry.
And then how debaters act gives them a political motivation to not say sexist things in round.
Keep going.
Keep going on what?
Oh, sorry, that was my bad. I'm looking at the time.
Okay, on to queer ecology. Extend perm do both. We can embrace the alternative and reject the use of feminizing metaphors. We are a prerequisite static TA. They foreclose the opportunity for anyone to self-identify using a static identity. This is inherently valid and only stopped by the permutation. The notion of fluidity creates a universal gender which Akata evidence from the 1AC specifically criticizes. And we break down masculine and feminine and normalize language structure they can't access. We solve the impact that they can't solve our app without this kind of analysis. Extend the gender neutrality. DA, the alternative does nothing or doesn't do anything to solve for the problems the 1AC. Lazar says when we ignore gender discrimination that comes from our words, we doesn't say anything. It's right here. When we ignore the gender discrimination,
It just becomes mystified and naturalized in our language.
it just becomes mystified and naturalized in our language. They say we create hierarchies, the natural versus the unnatural. This is descriptive of the status quo. We aren't creating the kind of hierarchies. They assume we not privilege the feminine over the masculine. I'll get to that later. We say we need to reach equality. I want to see endorse the perspective. The alternative is completely unable to get there. This is the gender neutrality view. We could create hierarchies. The statuses of staticism of nature explained above. And they say we force people to hide their identity, but this is not true. We allow people to identify themselves with whatever identity they choose. We don't force them out of intersectionality. The 1AC, which means that people can be fluid about their identities. Also, people who choose to talk about a specific person. And they say eugenics, we don't lead to the kind of homogenization they're talking about. And perm is able to solve because the intersectionality of the affirmative, we recognize the proliferation of identities. There's no reason why we can't solve back to that. And they say turns case doesn't make any sense, especially when there seems to be no competition scenario. On to decoloniality. The impacts of the case outweigh the impacts of the K. We have an in-round impact based on the use of the standard man, the NRC, and the debate. Debate is communicated activity where we learn best to create positive relationships with policy making. The affirmative is the best engagement. Extend Darcy, the permanent is key for any solvency because the individual policies. So when I see a lot of people get involved in their own terms and not be forced into a Darcy says this is the only way we have an effective movement. Extend the gender neutrality TA, the rigor evidence specific how when we try to change this without explicit focus on gender oppression, patriarchy is able to re-infiltrate. This interacts well with when I see Lazar evidence recognition key while ignorance is bliss is messified naturalized discrimination while the prioritization masculine. That's the car evidence. They say we drop the role of ballot. This is not true. This entirety of the debate contest the role of our ballot. Prefer the team creates the best strategy for changing the debate based in political. They say we have the best views of debate, but intersectionality 1AC seems to solve the best alternatives. So a specific starting point of coloniality. Don't let them continually shift out of this and extend the perm. We already shift away from the hegemonic Western knowledge production, both in debate and the political realm. They say that there isn't people in gender that don't want to claim gender defined. The 1AC doesn't force that at all.
They talk about trans people.
They talk about trans people.
Those who are identified as masculine,
those who are identified as masculine,
who want to be feminine, are allowed in the movement of the 1AC. We do not assign that to them.
Are allowed in the movement of the 1AC. We do not assign gender, we allow gender to be self-identified.
However, in the context of the political and the debate space, that assignment is already inherent.
In the context of the political and the debate space, that assignment is already inherent, which means that the 1AC counteracts this status quo assumptions of that.
Okay, talk about the prioritization of the feminine over the masculine.
Oh, and the stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, I've never been angry in a debate round before. I can honestly say that's not true, but when they get up and talk about why I'm not allowed to like engage in feminism, or why like feminism will like lead to prioritization of masculine or femininity or masculinity, I get really upset about that. Because I work in my daily life to like try and correct the various languages that my friends use that imply rape metaphors and the various languages that she's specified in the 1AC. There is no reason why feminism is any threat to my masculinity and is not a threat to your quality structures in the 1AC. I don't understand how she can get up there and tell me how I should interact with femininity. If anything, this is her creating this hierarchy and imposing it onto me, which is probably like internal link to her. Yeah, an internal link turn to her to their criticism. Okay.
They completely mischaracterize the 1AC.
They completely mischaracterize the 1AC.
We do not have the hierarchicizing.
We do not have the hierarchies. We do not have the hierarchicizing that we talk about.
That they talk about.
That they talk about.
Force upon us.
That they force upon us.
They say that we should be equal. That's what we say.
They say that we should be equal. That's what we say.
We don't try and prioritize. I stopped it again. We don't try and prioritize the feminine over the masculine or the woman over the man.
Like, yeah,
which is what all of their links are predicated on.
We don't prioritize the feminine over the masculine. Like when we talk about debate structures, we don't say like this is specifically bad, just that there needs to be multiple modes of debate and communication allowed within the debate space. They don't fall back for that.
On the queer ecology, Kay, the link is still unclear.
On queer ecology, the link is still unclear.
Either there is no link and we don't have the hierarchicizing.
Either there's no link and we don't have the hierarchicizing.
Or the other criticism links to this.
Or the other K
which means they are never able to overcome.
Which means they're never able to overcome.
We have exactly 5 minutes.
4 minutes, 59 seconds.
Right?
No, you have 5 minutes.
Did you read this stuff at the top?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, you want this stuff? Oh, yeah.
and then decoloniality.
Will you hand me my flow?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There you go, no problem at all.
Case,
I am in
query,
black.
ecology, and then decal.
That's right. And I'm going to do the NRC and then the debate.
Okay.
All right. Where's my timer? Pen. Is everyone ready? Shay, I'll get that from you in a minute, okay? All right.
Sorry.
Sure. First, it is not a political institution, but this is policy debate. We're all future policymakers, whether we debate the K or whether we debate the policy side of debate. This is a political institution, and this institution is always going to co-opt their argument. This is why they'll never solve. And they say that they don't organize hierarchies, but they do through the recreation and the privileging of a feminist epistemology. That's our Grossfigel evidence that they haven't answered back to at all about how they privilege it, and that privileging actually links back into decoloniality. This is how we're going to be turning the case. The combination of the Grossfigel evidence and their Lazar evidence says that when they privilege feminist epistemology in an established institutional space like this space, which is a political space, they're advocating for a political action here, even if they don't want to say that, then we're going to always be turning their case back against them because they'll always be causing the same harms that decoloniality points out. When you create hierarchies, that creates a problematic system. Let's go to the debate flow. We don't have to, let me read the top of that there. So this got a little bit muddled here in the block, and I want to make sure that we clear it up because I don't like anybody to walk away mad from us. We're not prioritizing feminine over masculine in the name of feminist discourse. Feminist discourse states that gender in the name, and you're advocating this is a fundamental starting point. We K that system is much more, the system is much more complex than what you're saying it is. We're not saying you can't engage in feminist theory. We're saying that this is not the best starting point to combat the most amount of systemic violence and hierarchies that exist in debate. And if you wish to educate others, to allow them to know that there are multiple modes of subaltern epistemology outside of feminism. And that is what the neg is trying to do, to break down as many hierarchical structures as possible to create the most access for everyone, not just for people who may be perceived by society as feminine. So we're not saying you can't talk about it, we're just critiquing it because we're negative, and we have to be negative in this round. The app refuses to allow another mode outside of Western epistemology because you can't use Western epistemology to K Western epistemology, and then you say you allow for subaltern knowledge in the framework of Western gender hierarchies. Okay, so that hopefully helps clear up the feminism debate a little bit for us. Let's go to queer eco. So, on the queer eco here, the permutation is always going to fail. You can extend it across that the permutation is a parasite leeching off the one NC rather, and that if we win even one link to this K, that we're going to be able to beat back the permutation. It's going to be a reason why the permutation fails. They extend their gender neutrality DA, but they just extend it in name only. There's no impact analysis in the 1AR. There's no other articulation in the 1AR. They just say we didn't answer it, so don't let the 2AR come up here and re-extrapolate it for you. They say we can't ignore hierarchies, but we can actually adopt a new way of thinking. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about a new way of thinking. I understand that it's scary for everyone in this room to divorce themselves from the way that they're thinking right now, but a new way of thinking is possible. It is possible for us to divorce ourselves from the hierarchical structures of society, the way that Grossfigel and Lugnos and the other authors that we read are talking about. Now, they say that the link is unclear to the queer ecology K, or that the K links to decol. This is a false dichotomy. It's not, this is two opposite ends of the spectrum. It's not post hoc ergo proctor hoc. It's that the link is unclear because they don't understand our queer ecology. I did a lot of work on the link in the 2NC about how they were creating an inside and an outside and privileging one form over another form. And we're going to fold this onto the decol debate here. You can cross apply the two.
They can't say they're not privileging because they're advocating for it. It's
right.
what the whole 1AC is based on. So
right. So we're going to fold the Morton evidence into the decoloniality debate here. The Morton evidence does not link back into decoloniality at all. You can call for the cards if you want to at the end of the round, Connie, but what I can tell you is that Grossfigel and Morton would agree with one another if they were in the same space, because Morton talks about how creating a hierarchy is wrong, creating a hierarchy actually excludes people, and
Gross-Fugel is talking about how we have to break down hierarchies. These two authors do not conflict with each other at all. So Gross-Fugel, these links work in the world of Gross-Fugel as well. The decoloniality alt is the strangeness of Morton. It is the acceptance and the embracing of the relationality and the difference between us. And so we can reject these binaries, all binaries in debate, not just the binary they're saying, and we can reject them here in this room, and we can all walk away with a better understanding of how we address oppression in the world, which I think everyone in this room wants to do, to the role of the ballot. No new arguments in the 1AR. If they didn't articulate the role of the ballot in the 2AC, then they don't get it in the 1AR. They may say that their act talks about their role of the ballot. They never said the words role of the ballot. It's nowhere on my flow. It means you only privilege our role of the ballot, which is whoever best challenges and delinks from the colonial matrix of power in the debate space. What this means is that we have to get away from the hierarchical construction of our society and the hierarchical construction of the 1AC. They can't access this because they privilege Western epistemology. They create another, and then they try to save it. They can't delink from the colonial matrix of power while they are steeped in it. The links here are pretty good. The Luganis link on third gender went unanswered by the 1AR. This is specifically about how when you privilege one type of epistemology, you leave others behind. This feeds into our trans arguments from earlier in the round. They completely devoid themselves of advocating for this third gender. Also, the Gross-Fugel evidence about privileging Western epistemology, privileging feminist epistemology, specifically talks about how when you privilege that, you're looking at a point zero, God's eye view, you're looking down at it and seeing how you can change everything. And that's bad, because what you need to be able to do is to look from the subaltern, to look up at it, and the Morton link. Now, the impact here is that they skew debate away from one hierarchy and into another. This is going to cause their impacts, their exclusion impacts. They haven't done any impact calculus, but their exclusion impacts, and it's going to cause the harms that they're talking about in the debate space when we privilege one feminist epistemology over all the other epistemologies.
42.
42 minutes?
Yeah.
42 minutes. It's a long story.
Okay. Everyone good? They say that Ceda is a political institution, and this means that our movement will be co-opted, but this is not true. So, the specific political institutions that those evidence is talking about is the governmental political institution. She says that historically feminist movements have been co-opted by the ideal liberal feminist, in which only the concerns of the Western white heterosexual heterosexual woman were talked about and discussed. This excluded everyone who did not fit into this. This is not what the 1AC does, and this is not what will happen with Ceda, because we are working round from round. We are able to actually produce change. People change when people change the terms that they use when they're addressed with them, especially when the ballot is on the line. This is where the role of the ballot comes in. Who best creates change in the debate community as well as the political. They say that we don't get a role of the ballot, but that's not true. Even if it's true, just don't term it as the role of the ballot. The entire debate contention is specific to when we are able to change our community, we need to do so, and if we fail to do so, we give up the only power that we have. Also, their role of the ballot is specific to their alternative on decol, which doesn't seem to be extended in the 2NR, so you have to go to ours. They say that our prioritization of feminist epistemology links to the decolonization argument, or the decoloniality argument, but we think that we are the best strategy. Also, continuously throughout the 1NC, they say that they are the best strategy, and that focusing on coloniality and decoloniality will be the best way to be able to solve for different forms of oppression. This means that the alternatives link to one another, and that they say that they criticize our starting point, but the intersectionality of the 1AC is going to be able to solve this best. The Lazar evidence is very specific to having different forms of self-reflexivity and a personal recognition of how we fit into different oppressive systems. Is going to be able to solve for all of their arguments on their criticisms. They say that the neg is a breakdown. The neg is breaking down the most structural oppression, but
This is not true. The intersectionality of the 1AC is going to be able to solve this just as well. Also, it means that they're going to link to the queer ecology criticism because they keep saying that they are the best strategy and the only strategy. We just said in the 1AC that we were a crucial strategy to being able to fix the political realm on the debate contention. We are the only ones who are actually going to be able to solve for the debate space. We are the only ones with an articulation of how we are able to do this. They have no articulation of what the alternative is in the 2NR or how they are able to overcome any of the problems that they outline or any of the problems that are outlined in the 2NR, which means that you're going to have to prep the affirmative because we are more specific in how our strategy goes about changing how women and those who are feminized in the debate space as well as the political realm, how we can change that. Okay. On the K. Regardless of what alternative you give them at the end of the day, we will win the roll of the ballot. They only have a roll of the ballot on the decoloniality K, which I talked about before. Prefer the team who best creates change in the debate community and the political. We change the debate space. That's the Bjork evidence and the Eisenberg evidence and the political, which is the Naples-Lazar and the Makajani evidence, which are all specific to discourse being able to predetermine who is heard and what is discussed in the political realm. Neither of the alternatives are going to be able to address this kind of exclusion because they do not take a stance on gender discrimination that is discursive gender discrimination. We are the only ones who have tangible solvency. The entire affirmative is going to be a disad to either of the alternatives that only the permutation is going to be able to resolve. They say that we can adopt a new way of thinking and that we can divorce ourselves from hierarchical structures, but that is what the 1AC does. That's subconvic and Bufano evidence from the 1AC. We adopt a new style of research as a feminist critical discourse analysis. They say that we create the false dichotomy when we say that the alternative on the decolonization of it or on the decoloniality argument links to the queer ecology argument. But, and I quote, they privilege one form of starting point over another that seems to be the link that they are going for on the queer ecology dissent. At best, this means that you reject the team because their decoloniality argument links to the criticism just as much, if not more, than the 1AC. At worst, it means that they don't have a link to the app at all because they articulate no other link scenario in the 2NR. They say that Morton doesn't link to decoloniality and that they agree with each other, but if this is true, they would probably agree with the authors of the 1AC because we say that intersectionality is probably going to be able to solve this. Best, this means that we are able to solve the criticism, but the criticism is not able to solve the case. They say that decolonization, decoloniality is accepting of relationality, but this is the kind of thing that the Lazar evidence talks about. They say that. They say the role of the ballot stuff. Whoever delinks coloniality, the coloniality structure of colonial power. I might have written that down wrong, but the role of the ballot doesn't make any sense in the context of the affirmative. This is an independent dissad to their role of the ballot. All of the impacts outlined in the 1AC, which include the mystification of gender terms. That's where the gender neutrality dissad comes in. That was extended explicitly on the colonization or decoloniality argument. When we don't address structures of patriarchy, they will inevitably come back to haunt us. We have to take an explicit step. The Lazar evidence is also descriptive of that.
Oh, good debate.
Debates without framework.
Good debate.
Yeah,
It was nice to meet you. Yeah, that was fun.
That's not, yeah. Nice clash. It's good to do it without having to